As we recall some of the functions learned before, we now are actually in front of a new table we haven't seen before, and a brief look at this table shows us that it actually is considering cities in the United States. Here is Atlanta, Boston, Charlotte, Denver, Houston, Los Angeles, New Orleans, New York, Philadelphia, Salt Lake City, San Francisco, and Seattle. And this table, we can see that it contains 12 rows and 12 columns, because if we select it like this, up here will be 12 rows, 12 columns. It actually consists of the distances between the cities. So for instance, if we take the third row and fourth column, Charlotte to Denver, we will see that the distance is 1008 miles. Or second row, fifth column is Boston, Houston, the distance being 1804 miles. Now let's go over some business terms or math terms that are associated with such problems always. It's natural to guess that if we fly from Boston to Houston, 1804 miles, it's going to be exactly the same as flying from Houston to Boston, 1804 miles. So our guess would be that this table is symmetrical. It contains the same numbers on the second row, fifth column, as on the fifth row, second column. The table is symmetrical. Okay, now the next thing about this table is that it contains, as the term goes, zeros on the main diagonal, because if we were going to fly from Atlanta to Atlanta, it would take us exactly 0 miles. And the other table we're considering is actually a transportation table. It doesn't consider flights of people, but rather of goods. So for instance, from Boston to Houston, 33 flights are undertaken. Or from Houston to Boston, it happens to be the same number, 33, but let's check if it always holds. From Atlanta to Los Angeles, the number of flights is 36. From Los Angeles to Atlanta, though, the number of flights is 28. So this table is not symmetric. It doesn't contain the same numbers in the first row and sixth column as in the sixth column and first row, as in the sixth row and first column, and but it still contains zeros on the main diagonal, which means that there's no point in shipping via planes, as our problem considers air transportation. There's no point in shipping via planes goods to the same city just for a takeoff and a quick landing. And now our question is, how big is the number of miles traveled? Because let's start with meaningful numbers, non-zeros. If there were 31 flights from Atlanta to Boston and each flight was 1037 miles, and if there were 33 flights from Atlanta to Charlotte and each flight was 674 miles, and there were 44 flights from Atlanta to Denver and each flight was 1398 miles, then how much did the logistics company travel all in all together? And it turns out that if we want to know the answer to that question, we will have to start multiplying. Equals 0 miles times 0 times flown, plus 31 times flown times 1037 miles. plus 33 times flown times 674 miles plus 44 times flown times 1,398 miles plus 42 flights flown times 789 miles. So we will have to start multiplying together the number of flights and the number of miles. This way we will get the number of total miles flown out of all these flights. Okay, the first row is done. Let's continue. From Boston, 42 flights times to Atlanta times 1,037 miles plus the zeros just for the style. We're just gonna multiply everything plus 34 flights from Boston to Charlotte times 1,005 miles for each flight plus, and we'll continue. And now at some point we might get tired because this formula is getting longer and longer. And it turns out that there is just one formula that actually does this just in one step, and we have already learned it. And let's remember that this formula is called sum product, which does exactly this. When we take a table, so equals sum product C5 colon N16. This is the first table, and now we write semicolon and take the second table, so it's C22 colon N33. So we are now going to, exactly the same way, multiply all these together and add them in a sum. And just in that one step we got to know that this logistics company flew 7,33 million miles altogether. Next we want to consider the discounts that this flying company makes. So the rule for discounting is going to be rather simple, namely, if you make over 40 flights you will get a discount of 5 flights on any of the routes. So for instance, if your number from Atlanta to Boston is 31 flights, it's gonna still be 31 flights you'll be paying for, but if your number from Boston to Atlanta is 42, you'll be actually paying for 37 flights. So such a simple rule for discounting, and then we'll see how much after the discount has been made for a business partner, how many miles for will the logistics company be charging. So let's write equals if, and now we'll again make these tables work together. So in the lower table we write equals if the upper table cell is above 40, above or equals 40, so 40 will already get the discount, above or equals 40, then we will take the very same value and subtract 5 from it. So it's C22 minus 5. And in the other case, if the number of flights remains below 40, we will not give the business partner any discounts, so it's still C22. And this discounting scheme could actually be more intricate, as we've done in the case of if function. We could have built a really difficult way of discounting in here, but right now we've done it really simply. So it's just like this, 40 minus 5. And we're going to copy it. Let's copy it to the other direction this time. So to one row. And now let's take the entire row and copy it down for all the rows. And the only thing that actually everything works because it takes always the upper table in parallel. It jumps to the upper table. And let's correct the formatting, so let's select the inside of the table. Let's do Control 1 and let's do border and let's do none. So let's turn off all the borders and let's go back to Control 1 and let's do outline and OK. And here it is, we're back with normal formatting. And now we would next like to calculate how many miles we will be, as a business partner, we will be paying for. So it's again a sum product. So it's equals sum product. And now we also have to give the blocks for two tables to be multiplied and then summed together. So we will select the upper one with the miles, semicolon, C5 colon N16 is the upper one. It writes down the upper left corner C5 and the lower right corner N16. And now semicolon on the other table, which is going to be C39 colon N50. So it's the lower table. And let's put parentheses, let's close the parentheses, and we see that we actually now have to pay for 7,08 million miles. So quite a discount for us.